So it's important for you to understand that the seasons are in God's hands. The question is, are you going to activate your time? Activating your time is when you take action within that season. Hello and welcome to On Your Lane. This is the best place for ambitious people who are taking charge of their lives, making that income, making that impact, and living fulfilling lives. How are you doing today? And today we're going to talk about times and seasons. There's a perfect time for everything, and there's a season for it. Sounds the same, right? But it's not. Let me tell you what. So, a season, for example, is an environment that it takes. Like it's winter, it's summer, it's rainy season. That means it's an environment that is usually beyond our control that is created. Now, the time exists within that season. The time is just an occurrence, right? So there could be a time for me to plant within a season. So the season is planting season or rainy season as we call it here. And within that season, I can choose to plant. And when I plant, time begins. So I have made within that season a time for me to plant. So I want to talk about times and seasons, not because I want to teach you about agriculture, though I'd love to, but I would like to just talk about us and our success. Because lately I have been thinking about the gestation period of things. You know, when you are working so hard toward a specific goal, you push and you have a hope that this is going to work out. I'm going to lose the weight. I'm going to achieve this success. I'm going to build the business. The relationship is going to work. Whatever it is that you're going for, you have a hope. And if you're a person who is determined, you have one mind, you're focused, then you actually just keep that hope alive. And sometimes you get to a place where you're like, you know what? In God's time, it's going to work. You know, I have done my best. I can't do anything else. And so when I look at gestational periods, I see that it doesn't take prayer for certain things to happen. I'll go back into the agriculture. Maize, for example, we grow a lot of it here. It takes 3 months. 3 months from planting to harvest. So whether we pray or don't pray, whether we fast or don't fast, whether we complain or don't complain, it takes 3 months. Okay, so if your blessing is in the harvest of maize, that means you will have to wait 3 months. And if 3 months is too long for you, you will miss out on the blessing there. So you need to learn to encourage yourself within the 3 months. You need to learn to keep yourself busy, productive within that 3 months so that you don't see it as a drag. You know, you're like, oh my goodness, 3 months is taking forever. It's just 2 days that has passed by. I think I have that experience when I was fasting one time, and I was fasting for a little bit longer than I normally do. And I was like, oh my goodness, it's day one. You're going through a whole lot of days and you're like, oh my goodness, am I going to survive? Because you're watching the time, you're watching the days. So it's the same thing with any blessing. God has put time for it. Let me go to Ecclesiastes 3 verse 1. It says that there is a time and a season for everything. Okay, we agree, right? There's a time and a season. And then in Ecclesiastes 11, it says that God has made everything beautiful in its time. For the longest time, I read this as in his time. So I always said, okay, God will make everything beautiful in his time. So he is the one holding the time, and he's the one to decide that, okay, the gestation period is over now, let's see beauty. But in actual sense, the verse says in its own time. So God has put times within things. Okay, so there's a time for a business to succeed. There's a time for maize to mature. There's a time for pregnancy to mature. There's a time in each and everything. When you decide to grow coffee, for example, you have subscribed to a certain amount of time. You can't expect the maize harvest to apply to the coffee harvest. It's a whole different ballgame. Coffee takes 3 or 5 years. You will have to be cultivating. You will have to be encouraging yourself within those 3 to 5 years whilst you wait for your harvest. Whereas a person who grows maize just needs 3 months. The game is different. The timelines are different. It's not God deciding. The choice you have made has a time attached to it. And this is important to keep in mind for whatever you're building. When you're doing the right things, when you keep pushing, you will have this valley of disappointment where you're doing all you can, but you're not seeing results yet. Don't give up. It doesn't mean that your effort is pointless. What it means is that you are pushing a gestation period. Keep pushing. If you read biographies of successful people, you see that everybody had this gestation period. It varies. according to the business, according to the person, according to the season they were operating in. Others were starting their businesses in a time when there was no technology. The gestation period was longer. Others are starting businesses in a time when there's technology. The gestation period is shorter. It varies, but there is always a gestation period. That is a time where you get tested. Do you really, really believe in your idea? Do you really, really stand for it? Are you committed to it? All these things will come through. And when you are committed to it, you keep pushing, you will see your results. You harvest your coffee. And the amazing thing about coffee, which takes 3 to 5 years for you to harvest, is that it makes all the money that the person who was harvesting maize that whole 3 or 5 years made, and some more. It has more value on the market. It is treated differently. With corn, people just plant it anyhow. You find it anywhere. With coffee, you need to have some expertise that are special to that. And therefore, when you have your product on the market, it is treated differently. The value you get is different. So you may have struggled for 3 to 5 years, having no income, cultivating and not seeing a harvest. Maybe people would have laughed at you. How are you doing? You've been working so hard. Look at us going to the market. Look at us making some money. Look at us pushing these numbers. And you find that over the 3 to 5 years, with their maize, they have made 10 million kwacha. You, with your first harvest, you've made 100 million kwacha from the coffee. It's possible. It's a different ballgame. So you have to understand which ballgame are you subscribing to. And whatever you're subscribing to has a timeline. It has its own gestation period. The season is not your business. You can't control the season. God controls the season. There is a season in Silicon Valley when great ideas were coming up. That's when Bill Gates was operating. That's when Steve Jobs was operating. I think there was some other guys, so many other guys that were coming up and mushrooming. It was just the right season for that technological advancement. It wasn't anybody who instigated that season. It was God in charge of the season. So he opened up that season. So people stepped up into that season. I'm sure Steve Jobs, Bill Gates had people and friends who would have partnered with them or who would have started these businesses. But they had their own reservations. They had their own fears. And they were like, you know what? Maybe I'll try it next time. Maybe I need some experience first. And they never broke through. They never broke through because when they were thinking, oh, let's start now, the season had passed. It was no longer time for startups that were going in that direction. The whole game had changed. Now it was a season for other things. So it's important for you to understand that the seasons are in God's hands. You can tell the seasons. You can tell that winter is coming. You can tell that the rainy season is coming. The question is, are you going to activate your time? Activating your time is when you take action within that season. Action that aligns to that season. So for me, when it's planting time, in Malawi, we start planting in December. I say I'll plant with the first rains in December. Okay, good. That means my maize needs 3 months. So in December, January, February, my maize has experienced the best portion of the rain. Great for me. But I could also decide and say, you know what, I'll plant in January. That's fine. I'll experience some rain. I could decide and say I'll plant in February. That's fine. But then if I decide to plant in, let's say, April, that's just a mess. Because there is no rain there. The season has passed. So sometimes we expect God to activate the time, to show us the time and say, okay, plant now. No, you plant when God opens up the season. You see the season is ripe for entrepreneurship. You see the season is ripe, like there are healings happening. You're like, oh, this is the season ripe for healing. Let me get into that. Let me tap into that. You see the season is ripe for businesses. You see the season is right, like everywhere around the world, these kind of businesses are coming up. Tap into it and start your thing. God won't come and say, okay, now it's rainy season, plant. No, he has opened up the season. The time is up to me. Okay, the season is up to God. The time is up to me. I decide how I want to tap into that season. And the season could pass and I could not tap into it. And that brings in its own issues. You know, I can plant my maize in April. That means I have to irrigate. That means I have to spend money and have more labor costs just to cultivate the same maize others were planting with free rain. You get it? So you have to understand the times and seasons and the gestation periods that apply within those seasons and activate them as soon as you can. The Bible says also something interesting, which says, remember the Lord in the time of your youth. That's a season. The time of youth is a season. I can't control it. God has put that in place. So I know that, okay, when I get to 20, and maybe when I get to 40, that is my youth, or 45, whatever it is, that is my youth. And God says, remember the Lord in that time. What does that mean? It means walk in your purpose in that time because you have energy in that time. Tap into God's goodness in that time because there's a time coming where your bones won't comply, where your muscles won't comply, where your mind will be forgetful. The Bible even says that. It says there'll be a time when the sounds of birds will be annoying to you and they'll be noisy to you and they'll wake you up. But the sound of a loud cry won't be able to wake you up. You see, it's a contradiction. It'd be like crazy because the youth has passed. And now your body is saying, you know what, we're done over here or we're shutting down. So the Bible says, remember the Lord in the time of your youth. Walk in your purpose in the time of your youth. Pursue your goals in the time of your youth when the season is right, because the season will pass. It won't always be right. But the time is up to you to decide. So if today I decide that, all right, I'll start growing my coffee or something, a great example I used to do in the past was if somebody said, let's grow coffee, I would always say, 5 years. Oh, I don't have that. 5 years will pass anyways. Okay. So for me, 5 years felt like a long time. Other people planted and I was like, no, I don't have that time. And I was doing other things. And the time they were making their money, I'm like, oh, wow, coffee is amazing. I want to plant it too. Now I have to start my 5 years now. You get it? The markets will have been saturated because now the time I'm starting, everybody has seen that coffee is making good bucks for these people and everybody's jumping into it. So I'm jumping with the bandwagon. When the season was right, I did not start my time. I waited it out. So time depends on me to tap into the season that is prevailing. And my relationship with God determines how I understand the season. Because if I don't know God who operates the seasons, how am I supposed to know that it's time for me to start my business? I won't. So I'll start my business amiss. I'll start my business out of season and I'll struggle. I could survive because you can survive on irrigation, right? You can plant out of season and irrigate, but it's just a hassle. It's just painful. The grace is not there. You have to fight pests that exist in that season that you wouldn't have had in the right season. You have to fight opposition. You have to struggle with it. You could survive because God may have determined that you must survive, you must succeed in that area, but it's going to be harder than necessary. So it's important that you have the right relationship with the owner of the seasons so that you can get the right promptings in your spirit and say, oh, okay, I feel led to start this business. I feel led to talk to this person. I feel led to partner with this person because the season is right and you're starting your time. I stick to God a lot in my story for success. Any advice I give anybody, I'll say God first. Because really, the next big thing is already happening right now. You know, there are people who are already working the next big thing. And there are people who will watch it and then start following a little too late. But how do you know when the best? How do you keep up with the next big thing? I see this happening a lot in this industry that I operate in, the digital marketing or the social media industry, where people are like, is Clubhouse it? Is TikTok it? Is this like chasing so many things? You're thinking, my big break, I should be one of the first in this area. I should be one of the first in this area. No, God, He will guide you. Isaiah 30 verse 21 or Isaiah 21 verse 30. One of those says, your ears will hear a voice saying, this is the way, walk in it. That's what God does with His children. And if you read Genesis 26 verse 12, God guided Isaac in a time of famine. It looked like the season was closed. It looked like the season was closed, but it wasn't. God had opened the season up. Everybody was moving to Egypt and running away because there was a famine. There's probably no rain at that time. But God told Isaac, stay, I'll bless you here. The season was open. So he planted in a famine and harvested 100-fold. He harvested and became prosperous, super prosperous, when people were struggling in that same season because they were not connected to the God he was connected to. They were not connected to the owner of seasons. So sometimes we can rely on our know-how, we can rely on our networks, we can rely on our knowledge and our experience, but it is always better to rely on God because that goes supernaturally beyond our ability. It goes beyond what makes sense. And we tap into an intelligence that is able to propel us to heights that the world cannot understand. So, to everything, there's a time and a season. Time, your responsibility. Season, God's responsibility. The connection, you get deep with God. You seek God and His mind. over all your affairs, and you will find that success that you seek. You'll find yourself operating in the right season and starting things at the right time and persevering through the gestation period, because it gets tough out here when you're operating, building, starting things, pushing, and looking to achieve a greater thing than yourself. It gets tough because you look at people, you look at track records, you look at everything, and it doesn't make sense. You're like, okay, I might have not heard right. Maybe I started something that was wrong. So you need the encouragement of the Lord himself to push you through in that gestation period, because God will say, the season is right, girl, don't stop. You might feel disappointed, people might not understand you. Boy, keep going and keep pushing. And before I go, if you're an ambitious person who wants to achieve a level of success that is tremendously amazing, I have created a free resource for you. It's called the Zone of Success ebook. In this ebook, you will learn what God has equipped you with. It's a simple exercise, 3 questions that will guide you towards your unique set of skills that God has equipped you for your success. When you operate in this unique set of skills, you will find that success is attracted to you. You'll find that you operate in your zone of success, your zone of genius, where things become easier, enjoyable, and your success becomes inevitable. Sounds good? If this sounds good, click the link in the description box and get to do this exercise. It will be tremendously helpful towards the purpose that God has for you and the purpose that you want to achieve. I hope you found value in this episode. I can't wait to see you because we have new episodes every week. So stick around, like, share, subscribe, and let's keep connecting. My details are in the description box. Click those links. Let's get in touch. I love to always hear from you if you have any questions or comments. I will see you next week. Bye-bye.